So first question. New fields, quicker, smarter. What is the biggest single issue standing in the way of achieving this? New fields, quicker, smarter. What's the biggest single issue standing in the way of achieving this? Archie, do you want to kick us off on that?
Okay, well, I think in the UKCS we have made quite a lot of strides, particularly with input from the whole supply chain in that phase of execution through sanction to first production. It can still be squeezed a little bit further, but that's an area we've focused on for years. But when we do look-backs from the whole cycle through the prospect, or even before that, when it's just a glint in our eye, we particularly seem to lose time and traction up to that first project sanction point. And some of that is internal commercial negotiations between co-venturers. Some of that is infrastructure access negotiation. I think we lose too much time on the commercial piece. So what I'm saying is, by all means, let's keep applying the technology and the execution, keep that focus, but apply the same sort of focus to the commercial negotiations and tighten all that up.
Thanks very much. Bill, you want to?
Well, I just echo kind of what Archie said. I get blamed for sometimes being too direct, but you look at live examples like our project that we're working on with Archie, which is Rochelle. The commercial terms to access the Scott platform, and Archie's a fairly significant owner in that platform. Apache's an owner in it now too, but to wait around for 15 months to even get a response to a proposal that you put in front of you that was reasonable commercial terms is, to put it in perspective, talking about capital. When you have a $300 or $400 million project and the cost of capital, pick it whatever you want, but for independent sector is probably 10 plus today, you've lost $30 or $40 million for every year that you delay that project in present value going to that project. That makes allocation of capital tough. And to put it in a different scenario, the common carrier approach that I talked about earlier, in the Gulf of Mexico that has been revitalized several different times, there the infrastructure holders are fighting for the independents to find new reserves and put it on production. So you can do it in a much shorter time. The technology's here, the people are here, the quality control procedures are here. We have a great engineering population here, so we should be able to do this in a much quicker amount of time. So I kind of echo what Archie had to say.
Thanks, Bill. Jim, do you have anything to add?
Well, to build on both what Archie and Bill have commented, certainly the commercial proceedings are a challenge. But I think to add to it, with this question, it underscores the need of keeping the supply chain anchored in the UK and keeping at least the capacity that's here, if not build on it, because you look at so much of what we're doing in this day and age is subsea related. To go out and secure access to either pipelines or pipe-laid vessels or the bundled systems that we're using, you've got to get in line in many cases, and that adds time. So one, it's very important to keep the expertise here and the capacity, and who knows, I might like to see another bundle facility up in the Wick area added so we can run projects in parallel.
So just stay there, Jim, because there is another question that's related to that, and it was aimed at you, but I'd like everybody to come in if they could be. Jim House mentioned the importance of anchoring the supply chain in the UK. Do the panel members have any practical suggestions as how to take that forward? So what practical steps do you think are needed to take that forward? Jim, can we start with you, and then we'll come along to Bill and then Archie?
That's a tough and broad question. Obviously, keeping investment levels up helps. And so we all have a role to play in that, including the government. So if the environment's right for allocation of capital, investment programs, clearly that's going to help. The pace of activity decreases and it's more cost advantaged for the companies to go elsewhere. The market's going to drive decisions. So making sure that the environment's right for investing. You've already got world-class educational institutions to supply fresh graduates. It's amazing with our industry, and right now we're seeing it again, that there's challenges for human resources. And elsewhere in the world, there's people looking for jobs. It's just amazing. So we need more engineers. We need more geoscientists. We need more technicians, and both with oil companies and the supply chain. So let's keep the fiscal systems right. Perhaps there's some incentive structures that could be put in place, and find a way to repatriate people and capital back to the UK that's already taken off. Yep.
Thanks, Jim. Bill, some further thoughts?
Well, I think Jim had it correct, and we have talked about this a long time before, but you need to incent capital to come to the UK North Sea. We've proven over time, I think UK Oil and Gas has a statistic that the industry spent £300 billion over the 40 years it's been here, and it's generated £300 billion of tax revenues. I sit on two other companies' boards that both had motivation to come to the UK North Sea, but because the business environment is such, they have not moved equipment into the North Sea. There's only two pipe-lay vessels really in the entire North Sea that we can attend to. We see drilling rigs being moved out of this environment to other parts of the world, which does two things. One, we have a smaller amount of equipment to access, and it keeps the prices high, which works against us going forward. So when you incent capital investment in the environment, you attract services and people and things that we need to move forward, and you will eventually drive down costs and get better rates of return. So I think it's a capital decision.
Thanks. Archie?
Yeah, I think building on Bill's comment, in a tangible sort of short-termist view, going back to my comments about exploration and appraisal wells, I do think that we need to work with government to put some focus on that so that we create more of a demand, so that there's more desire to drill exploration and appraisal wells. And then the market will respond, and hopefully we will see some more rigs in particular be attracted back to the North Sea. That would be the measure of success, if we see rigs coming back to the North Sea. And I think that's something we need to focus on because of that kind of window of opportunity that I was talking about.
Thanks. Next question, I sort of sense an air of frustration in this question. I'm going to come to you, Bill, for it first, if I might. I might be listening very hard to the answer too as well. What has to change to get support for an oil and gas working group to be formed to promote the development of legislation for access to infrastructure and pipelines?
Boy, I'm not sure I have a great answer. I actually believe that the comment I made earlier today about trying to move to a common carrier approach, that we here in this room need to kind of jump on that and begin to move it that direction. I will tell you that every mature environment, any place in the world, has moved to a common carrier approach. And when you did that, because of this issue of access to infrastructure, investment will flow here pretty quickly. Why we continue to play the games that we play here in terms of these long, extended commercial discussions to get access to infrastructure when we know there's a lot of capacity and a deteriorating environment out there to go forward. So you asked me, I guess, Malcolm, what it takes. I'm passionate about the subject. I've offered to the Energy Minister to lead that effort for us as an industry, and that's gone on deaf ears. So maybe it takes somebody that's bigger and has more influence like Apache or other companies, but we need to take that leadership role and convince people that that's what needs to be done for the benefit of this petroleum system that we have here in this country.
Thank you. Jim, any comments you'd like to make on that?
Bill, I think they're keen on the experience there. Clearly, you've done it in the U.S. Malcolm, I mean, you've got pilot, you've got fiscal forum. There's some avenues and platforms to establish this, infrastructure code, infrastructure access are key parts of both pilot and the fiscal form. So we've got Bill Katnack, who certainly facilitates both those organizations. That's the best place I would imagine to at least start it. But it is vital. We've heard it. We've talked about it for decades. There's a code of practice that's in place. We've had some mock debates inside Oil and Gas UK that actually brokered a few deals that had reached a stalemate. We did one ourselves, which was good. So you got principles in, and what we find is that maybe Archie and I would agree on a deal in principle, and once it goes off in the organization, you get some pretty smart guys that want to be, or gals that want to be the cleverest person in the room, and end up trying to get that extra pound that causes deals to go months and months and years. Yeah. But the answer is, I think you've got the forms, you have the platforms in place. Perhaps through pilot, we find a way to get a real traction.
It's probably wrong of me as a sort of question master to involve myself in the answers, but
Correct.
I would say to this that Oil and Gas UK is definitely up for playing a constructive role in this, and I think there is a conversation to be had between the industry and the government, and we're certainly up for that. Archie?
Yeah, I think undoubtedly Oil and Gas UK, and we do have some vehicles. I think what's changing, and you're hearing maybe a slightly one-sided argument from this panel, but there is a sense of urgency. There's that sort of pressure to take the next step around access to infrastructure. So I think that's a conversation the industry and government should welcome.
Fine. Archie, this one is aimed at you, but I'm going to ask, you shouldn't have all the fun on this. I think everybody can answer this one as well if they can. In your opinion, how good are we in the UKCS at hard economics on a scale of 1 to 10, please? And what specific measures can be introduced to move up the scale, industry-wide as well as within individual organisations? That's a good one. Good luck.
Well, I think we are almost too good at hard economics insofar as sometimes that stops us from pressing forward in terms of we do too much work, and when we're doing our decision and risk analysis, we perhaps focus too often on the downside. So there's clearly the capability, but I kind of go back to my earlier comment in terms of life cycle, and it's clearly you can hear that there's been cooperation, and not always cooperation even between the members of the panel. So in terms of getting projects moved through quickly, then we need to, again, focus on these commercial aspects and tighten all that up. And then I think the economics just kind of speaks for themselves. And as you've heard, we still believe that there's lots of robust opportunity here in the North Sea. I think all three panel members are talking to that. Those will speak for themselves, but we do need to focus on this cycle time.
Thanks. Bill, anything to add on that? Or?
Well, I agree with Archie and what he said. Our experience has been whenever we buy assets or we put some sort of asset into production, the returns come out a lot better than what we have analyzed because the petroleum system's good. Jim talked about his great example where it took a lot of hard work, but once you put the work in place, the petroleum system kicked in and they've had great returns on that over time. I agree with Archie. We spend an awful lot of time running models and stuff. We know, I think, as an industry, this group is easy to talk to because we're all more or less of the same mindset, but we need to have the courage to move forward and put capital to work and get on with it. I think what happens is we destroy value when we let it kind of drag on like it is. But this group in general has the courage to go forward and make things happen. So.
Thanks, Bill. Jim?
Okay, well, third in line here, so I'm going to come at a slightly different take and build on those comments. I think a lot of it has to do with organizational behavior. What we see when we look at ourselves internally and we look at other companies that we do business with, that there's this whole process of managing risk, and Archie mentioned sometimes there's too much focus on the downside. But what we've seen is that organizations, as they grow, in particular, they go from managing risks to putting systems in place to deal with making decisions to ultimately where it takes a very long time to get to a decision, which once again destroys the value chain. What we also see is that in large organizations where there's more downside for trying something that may not have worked as well as planned than the upside for trying something that actually worked well or better than planned. And that unfortunately influences the wrong kind of behaviors. We think that incentive systems work, where it gears people to be focused and accountable, not only for annual production, but also long-term investments and how they're doing with rate of return and return on capital and things like that. So the right kind of behaviors need to be instilled in organizations to make timely decisions.
Right. Just hold you there because it fits. This is just the way they fall. I think to some degree you might be building on this because this one is aimed at you, Jim, and I think you are you're the person to put it to, the right person to answer it. What are the main drivers behind such a significant difference between North Sea average and Apache production costs? So what are the main drivers behind that significant difference?
How much time do I have?
Sorry?
Well, I'll try to be brief. First off, size helps. With 40s we have 5 platforms, and barrels there's 2. I failed to mention actually barrel with being roughly 50% gas is helping our operating cost profile. But with 40s, size matters, so we have 5 platforms, and since they're all working together as opposed to 5 independent fields, that in itself provides a significant benefit for us. Having them linked together, new equipment, people making decisions, control systems at work, production efficiencies, and getting either the numerator or the denominator right in both cases. And we focus on both, but if you get the denominator right in terms of barrels, that drives your operating cost profile down. So we do obviously keep an eye on our costs and try to be smart about our decisions, but we like to drive that number more through the denominator than the numerator.
Thanks. I think each of you talked about UK content, and the next question relates to that. And we'll start with you, Archie, if we might, on this one. Should the UK government demand a minimum percentage of UK content in UK development projects? And if so, what?
Well, I would argue that they don't need to, because automatically operators, as we lay out contracts, will want to go to capable suppliers, but fundamentally capable suppliers that are nearby. So automatically, if the capability exists here in the UK and it's competitive, technically, commercially, etc., we naturally will default to the UK because it's a short supply chain. So I personally don't think that something prescriptive would actually help or change behaviors. I do think the fundamental is that we're investing in the North Sea, and then the market will work because there will be a healthy supply chain here in the UK.
Thanks very much. Bill?
Really can't add to that. Anytime you put restrictions on how you access the market, I think that you end up making mistakes along the way. And I don't find any issues for us in terms of being able to source things here in the UK. I go back to what we've talked about a couple times, and I hate to be redundant, but if you incent capital investment here, you'll have plenty of opportunities to source it properly here. But if you try to put barriers on who you have to do business with, that affects the market and ultimately affects rate of return on your capital projects going forward.
Do you have anything to add? No? You agree with the other panel on this? Yeah, fine. Question for everybody, but we'll start with Bill on this one. Archie observed that the government should take a more holistic view of the industry, not just tax, but employment, balance of payments, etc., etc. How does the panel think we should best achieve this? So how can we stimulate the government, I guess, to take that more holistic view? Bill?
Well, maybe I've tried to stimulate that by calling it a national treasure. I thought that would get somebody's attention. And how do you let an industry and this national treasure that's been a part of this environment for over the last 40 years that really developed and created the offshore industry, kind of let that dwindle away? There are 440,000 jobs that are associated with the energy business here in the UK. It generates roughly a quarter of tax revenues to the government. We have proven that even in an environment where we have kind of either an overly regulated or an under-regulated, depending on how you look at it, environment, that an activity has been at best flat in the years that I've been involved over here, probably down. We can still create new reserves, new production, and better tax revenues and things that are really good for this environment. I can't conceive of letting the offshore industry and 25 billion barrels. I would also argue that the North Sea has let its intellectual capital slide away to other parts of the world. The majors came in here and developed things and then moved it off to other parts of the world. It's been hard to incent companies like Apaches and Nexans to come in to this environment. But if you do it, I mean, there's great things that can come out of it for all of us going forward. So the holistic approach is this is going to be a big bridge to whatever we end up doing in this world and in the UK going forward, and we shouldn't let this kind of dwindle away. It's one of these great assets and great environments that we ought to nurture and prudently operate going forward.
Thanks, Bill. Archie, what are you going to think? How do we encourage this holistic view from government?
Well, I think we have to keep. Well, let me step back. I'm not sure as an industry we do a good enough job of, if you like, proclaiming our successes, both to government and perhaps even to society. Certainly not beyond sort of local Aberdeen. So I think that's a difficult thing to do because it's a complex industry, but I think that's something that we've probably got to focus on even more. I know that, and I very much see Oil and Gas UK as the voice of the industry, and I think we need to further channel our efforts through Oil and Gas UK and be very focused and targeted with who we try and communicate if you like, the industry message. We're starting to get it out there. I just don't think we've done enough. That's where my comments were coming from.
Jim?
So to build on both what Bill and Archie have commented on, I think the activity survey this year was very telling. And the part that stood out to me the most was around capital efficiencies. And the fact it reflects the maturity of the basin. There is a big prize. There is upwards of 24 billion barrels of resource opportunities. They're not reserves. It's not a given that we're going to recover those. But our capital efficiency, and that's something we probably ought to compare to other basins, has gone down, and we're about a third of what it was several decades ago. And it's not that we're making poor decisions, we're making solid decisions. It's just it's taking more money to develop the same kind of reserves. So I think that's a very loud message, and I think it underscores that the government needs to take stock of the fact that we are in a challenging business that's mature, and we've got to protect the national prize.
Thanks very much. Again, I just might add there, I think Oil and Gas UK is fully up to that, and we've actually got a major initiative going on at the moment internally. We're doing a lot of research around how we try and raise the public profile, actually, and I think that's what's so important. If we want more politicians to know what's going on here, let's get to the public and get our message out broadly to the public. And again, if I might, And I'm sorry to go on praising one company all the time today, but I think the Centrica move with the film is hugely important. We've got to get ourselves into the popular media, actually. We've got to get ourselves into the popular press, not just the Financial Times, and the excellent P&J. By the way, as you leave today, there's a complimentary copy of the P&J over there, and actually some memory sticks as well that have been kindly donated by Endeavour, because actually it is now time to wrap up. We need to get you out of here by past. So first, may I start by thanking on your behalf our three really excellent speakers today. It's flown by today, and that's something to do with the quality of what we heard. And could I ask you please all to express your thanks with me in the customary way.